on linear perspective. Imagine your perspective as a scene framed through an open window. The window on the world was a common metaphor for Renaissance-era painting when linear perspective was first invented. The canvas was seen as a metaphorical window showing insight into artists' perspectives. Renaissance artists of Southern Europe also often included windows and frames in their works to emphasize this sentiment, that they were showcasing their unique and individual human perceptions. Renaissance-era creators and thinkers were in the midst of a cultural moment looking to classical era of ancient Greece and Rome for their inspiration. That is why it's called the Renaissance. It's a revival of classical ideas about math, art, and philosophy, such as humanism. Renaissance-era humanism is the basis for the creation of linear perspective. It's a philosophy which originated from the classical era, emphasizing individuality and placing humans at the center of the universe between earth and heaven. The proliferation of humanist ideas were radical and ultimately led to major cultural changes such as the Protestant Reformation. Still, Renaissance-era artists, philosophers, and scientists were primarily patronized or supported by the Church, who used Renaissance humanism to emphasize Christian ideals. Because humans were created in God's image, our human bodies, achievements, and perspectives were of unique importance and worthy of study. Filippo Brunelleschi, an Italian Renaissance-era architect, is credited with introducing the classical principles to create linear perspective. It was a system which allows artists to create an illusion of depth and space by mathematically mapping a 3D space onto a 2D surface, imitating the perception of the human eye that faraway objects recede into space. So here's a quick visual guide to creating an image with linear perspective. If you're artistically inclined, maybe you'll try it yourself. It's just one of many grid techniques that artists have been using for centuries, and notebook paper is perfect for trying it out. So all you need is paper and something to draw with, and a ruler or something straight enough to make straight lines. The first thing that we map out in establishing linear perspective is the horizon line. It represents the space where land and sky meet, horizontally, of course, because linear perspective operates from the perception of a standing human person. In most images created using linear perspective during the Renaissance era, the horizon line is established at eye level with any human figures, whether they're closer or farther away. The next thing to mark in establishing a grid for linear perspective are or multiple vanishing points, which are points where objects are so far from the human eye that they seem to vanish. We can no longer perceive them because of how far away they are. In this case, the vanishing points can be within or outside of the frame, and that would depend on the scale and proximity of other objects being represented in the image. After you've established your vanishing point or points, you draw your orthogonal lines. Orthogonal lines radiate from the vanishing point and make up the horizontal limits of the objects represented. The foundational platforms or uppermost lintels of classical buildings, for example. Rather than going straight across, as the horizon line does, orthogonal lines radiate out. And this is to suggest depth of field. Again, close objects appearing large, small objects, or faraway objects appearing small. The next thing to establish in a linear perspective grid are transversal lines, which transect or cut into the orthogonal lines. As you can see, they go straight up and down vertically, just as a classical column. And once you can combine the two, the rest is left up to the artist or individual's creative human mind as to how to fill it in. Renaissance artists would have erased their grids to keep their artistic techniques guarded. It was an era of competition. Contemporary artists might leave in the grid to show off their understanding of this system dating back to antiquity. Now, when you observe a drawn or painted image that relies on linear perspective, you'll understand how the artist was relying on mathematical principles dating back to the classical era to achieve this, and perhaps be reminded of that framing device, the window on the world, how linear perspective itself evokes the humanist spirit of the Renaissance era. Thank you.